Jin sat slumped, head bowed as the teacher's accusations echoed around him. Saya's tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I trusted you. How could you betray me like this?" He was horrified. "I didn't do anything wrong." A few weeks earlier, on a bright spring morning, Jin walked through the gates of Ioba High School as if he were a ghost drifting among the living. Students streamed around him in laughing clusters, sharing stories of spring break adventures and class gossip. But Jin moved unnoticed, navigating the bustling hallway with practiced invisibility. It had only been a month since he transferred into Class 3C midterm, and Jin had already learned that keeping a low profile was safer. Better to blend into the background than to risk drawing attention, especially the wrong kind of attention. He arrived at the long row of shoe lockers and knelt to swap his outdoor shoes for school slippers. As he fumbled with the small metal door, a sudden shadow loomed. Before Jin could react, slam! A heavy palm smacked against the locker door just inches from his face, the metal clanging like a gunshot. Jin flinched violently, heart leaping into his throat. He didn't need to look up to know who was towering over him. A familiar dread washed over him as he slowly raised his eyes. Goro stood there, a third-year senior, broad-shouldered, with a predatory grin that didn't reach his cold eyes. Flanking him were his cronies, Watto and Hiro, both cracking their knuckles in anticipation. They were notorious around school for tormenting underclassmen. Since Jin's very first week, they had marked him as easy prey. Well, Goro drawled, tone mocking with false friendliness. "Look who's back. Did you miss us over break, Jin?" Jin's mouth went dry. He pressed back against the lockers, trying to appear small and non-threatening. His mind raced, searching for an escape, but Watto had casually stepped behind him, blocking any retreat. I need to get to class," Jin managed to stammer. His voice barely rose above the din of the hallway. He knew better than to meet Goro's gaze. That could be seen as defiance. Goro chuckled. "Not so fast. We have some business, remember?" He hooked 2 fingers into the breast pocket of Jin's blazer, tugging it lightly. "You didn't forget our little arrangement?" Jin's stomach twisted. Of course he hadn't forgotten. The so-called protection fee that Goro extorted from him on a regular basis. Over the break, Jin had barely scraped together enough money for textbooks and a bit of food. He had nothing left to give, and Goro knew it. I don't have anything today," Jin whispered, bracing for the inevitable backlash. Goro's grin faded into a scowl. For a second, there was silence. Then a fist collided with the locker beside Jin's head with a loud clang. The hallway momentarily quieted as a few students glanced over, but upon recognizing Goro, they quickly averted their eyes and hurried away. No one dared intervene. Hiro snatched Jin's backpack off his shoulder. Without ceremony, he upended it, dumping books and papers onto the floor. Watto rifled through the pockets, searching for any money. After a thorough shake, it became clear Jin truly had nothing to offer. "Empty?" Hiro muttered, sounding almost disappointed as he tossed the bag aside. "Not even a 100-yen coin." Watto clicked his tongue, wasting our time. Jin pressed his palms flat against the cool metal locker behind him, anticipating what Goro would do next. He didn't have to wait long. Goro seized the front of Jin's blazer, yanking him closer. "You expect free protection, is that it?" Goro hissed. "Maybe you think the rules don't apply to you just because you're new." "No, Jin began, but pain exploded in his midsection as Goro drove a knee into his stomach. The air rushed from Jin's lungs. He doubled over, wheezing. A few onlookers winced in sympathy, but still nobody stepped forward. Jin squeezed his eyes shut. He wanted to fight back, but fear kept him paralyzed. Goro loomed over him, flexing his knuckles. "Maybe a week without lunch will teach you to come prepared." "Good morning," a clear female voice rang out down the corridor, cutting through the tension like a blade. "Is everything all right here?" The effect was instantaneous. Goro's fist hovered in the air, then reluctantly lowered. Watto and Hiro stiffened, their aggressive postures faltering. All 3 bullies turned toward the source of the voice. Walking toward them with calm, authoritative strides was Saya Sato, Class 3C's class president and the school's beloved student council leader. She wore a gentle smile, but her eyes were sharp as they swept over the scene. Jin on the floor, belongings strewn around, and the 3 seniors looming over him. "Goro, Watto, Hiro." Saya addressed each by name with a polite nod. "You're not causing trouble, I hope?" Goro cleared his throat, straightening up and attempting a disarming smile. "Of course not, President. We were just having a friendly chat with our underclassmen here." Jin gasped for air, his face twisted in pain. Saya stepped closer, positioning herself subtly between Goro and the fallen boy. It looked a bit one-sided for a friendly chat. She reached down and offered Jin her hand. After a heartbeat of hesitation, he took it. Saya pulled him gently to his feet. Once Jin was standing, Saya turned to face the bullies fully. Though she was a head shorter than Goro, she radiated confidence. "I'm sure there's no misunderstanding," she continued, "because you know bullying a fellow student is a serious violation of school rules." Watto and Hiro exchanged uneasy glances. Goro opened his mouth as if to protest, but Saya didn't give him the chance. She smiled disarmingly. "Thank you for looking out for Jin. I'll take it from here." Her words were polite, but the firmness behind them left no room for argument. For a tense second, Goro's eyes flickered with defiance. But Saya's reputation and authority in the school were undeniable. Getting on her bad side could mean real consequences. Finally, with a forced chuckle, Goro relented. Sure thing, President. We were just leaving. He shot Jin a dark look that promised retribution later, then jerked his head for his friends to follow. Watto silently dropped Jin's notebook he had been holding, and the trio slunk away down the hall. As soon as they were out of sight, Jin exhaled shakily, hardly believing the bullies had backed off. Saya turned to him, her expression soft with concern. Are you all right? She asked. Jin nodded quickly, face hot with embarrassment that she'd found him cowering on the floor. I'm fine, thank you, really. He felt utterly ashamed that she had to rescue him. Saya bent down and began gathering the scattered contents of his bag. Here, she said kindly, handing him a textbook. You shouldn't have to put up with that. If they bother you again, let me or a teacher know, okay? Jin murmured an agreement, though he doubted telling a teacher would do much. He carefully placed his books back into his backpack. Once everything was collected, Saya gave a cheerful nod. Why don't we walk to class together? We're in the same homeroom. After all, Jin could only manage a quiet okay. Students in the hall were staring openly now, whispers floating by about how the class president was personally escorting the new guy. As they walked, Saya talked in a light, easy manner. She didn't bring up the bullying at all, for which Jin was grateful. Instead, she asked if he was settling in all right and if he had enjoyed the break. It amazed him that someone as important as Saya was bothering to make small talk with him. When they reached Class 3C's door, Saya paused and flashed Jin an encouraging smile. If you need anything, just ask, okay? We classmates have to look out for each other. With a small wave, she headed to her seat at the front of the room. That morning in homeroom, Jin stayed quiet as usual, but something had shifted. Normally, he kept his eyes down, but now, occasionally, he found himself stealing a glance towards Saya. Once, she caught his eye and gave a reassuring little smile. Jin quickly looked away, face flushed. Over the next several days, life at school changed subtly for Jin. True to her word, Saya made an effort to include him and shield him from further harm. During lunch break, Jin retreated to his usual hiding spot under the stairwell with his lunchbox. Before he could start eating alone, Saya appeared with a sunny grin and invited him to join her and some friends on the rooftop. Jin hesitated. He wasn't used to such invitations, but Saya's insistence was gentle, yet unwavering. Unable to refuse, Jin followed her up to the roof. There, a small circle of students welcomed him. Saya's companions introduced themselves. Ken, the earnest student council vice president, nodded politely, and Yumi, a sporty girl from the tennis club, greeted him with a bright smile. They chatted about classes and clubs while eating lunch. The friendly banter was so normal and warm that Jin felt like he was watching a scene from someone else's life. After lunch, as they all headed back to class, Saya walked alongside Jin. I hope we didn't overwhelm you. She trailed off, giving him an apologetic look. Jin quickly shook his head. It's okay. I had a good time, he admitted. Her face lit up. I'm glad. You're always welcome with us. Those simple words meant more to Jin than he could express. Of course, Goro and his gang still lurked at the edges of Jin's awareness. A couple of times Jin spotted the bullies watching him from afar in the hallway or the schoolyard, but they never approached him when Saya or any of her friends were nearby, and Saya seemed to have a sixth sense about their scheming. Before any confrontation could happen, Saya would smoothly change their route or suddenly engage Jin in conversation, guiding him away. She never outright mentioned the bullies, but Jin understood. She was subtly protecting him. He wanted desperately to repay her kindness in any way he could. If Saya was leaving the classroom with an armful of notebooks, Jin would hurry to take some of them, offering to deliver the stack to the teacher's office. When she had to prepare a classroom for a council meeting, he volunteered to help arrange chairs or clean the blackboard. At first, Saya laughed and insisted he didn't need to trouble himself, but Jin was persistent. Eventually, she smiled and graciously accepted his help. Thank you, Jin. You're really dependable. The praise warmed him from the inside. With Saya's support, Jin's status in class rose as well. Classmates who once ignored him now offered friendly greetings, and he was included in group activities instead of being left on the sidelines. Jin blossomed under that positive attention, but not every day was peaceful. One cloudy afternoon, something troubling happened that shook the fragile trust around Jin. Classes had ended, and many students lingered in the halls and courtyards. Jin was in the student council room with Saya, helping her sort through a pile of pamphlets for the upcoming cultural festival. Yumi had left earlier for tennis practice, and Ken was photocopying documents down the hall, so it was just the two of them amid the clutter of posters and paperwork. He continued stacking pamphlets when he heard Saya sigh. That's strange, she murmured, more to herself than to him. Jin looked up. Is something wrong? He asked. My purse, Saya said slowly, patting the empty pocket of her bag. It's gone. I could have sworn it was right here. Jin set the pamphlets aside. Maybe it fell out, he suggested, kneeling down to check the floor. Saya joined him in scanning the area, but the purse was nowhere in sight. They searched the entire council room. Nothing. Saya bit her lip, worry creasing her brow. It has my train pass and some money. This is bad. Jin felt concern on her behalf. When did you last have it? She thought for a moment. I paid Okada for the printouts about half an hour ago. If it isn't here now, maybe I dropped it in the hallway or someone picked it up. Let's retrace your steps, Jin suggested, already moving toward the door. Saya gave a grateful nod, and they left the room. Jin and Saya scanned the floor and corners along their path. As they neared the print room, Saya called out to Ken and explained the situation. He hadn't seen the purse but promised to keep an eye out and ask around. They returned to classroom 3C, checking Saya's desk and locker. Still nothing. By now, Saya looked genuinely distressed. Suddenly, voices drifted from just outside the classroom. I heard Saya lost something, one girl was saying. Yeah, her purse. They say someone might have taken it, another replied in a hushed tone. A small group of students had gathered near the doorway, whispering among themselves. When Jin and Saya stepped out, the group hushed, eyes widening. One of the girls mustered the courage to ask, Saya, is it true your purse is missing? Saya nodded. It seems I misplaced it. Have any of you seen it around? The students shook their heads. A boy frowned and said, if it was stolen, maybe someone hid it. We could help look. A few others murmured agreement. And before long, a search party formed. They spread out, checking windowsills, behind potted plants, under benches, even bags. Minutes later, a shout came from further down the corridor. Found it! Everyone converged toward the voice. A first-year student was standing outside the boys' locker room, holding up Saya's floral-patterned purse. Relief swept over Jin on Saya's behalf, until the first-year nervously added, it was in someone's bag. The younger student looked past him and directly at Saya. I found it in his bag, he said, pointing toward Jin. Sure enough, at the boy's feet was a familiar backpack, Jin's, which had been left outside the council room earlier. Its contents were now spilled out, likely from the search, and among notebooks and pencils lay the little purse. Jin's world tilted. He stared at the purse in disbelief. That's not possible, he breathed. He had not touched Saya's purse except to help search the council room. How could it be in his backpack? Whispers erupted among the onlookers. Jin heard fragments. It was in his bag? Did he steal it? His face burned with embarrassment and rising panic. I never saw it until now. Some of the students looked skeptical. Others looked uncomfortable, unsure what to believe. Saya stepped forward. She gently picked up her purse and opened it. After a quick check that everything was intact, she let out a soft sigh of relief. Then, to Jin's surprise, she turned to the group and bowed her head. I'm sorry for all the trouble. It seems I was careless and dropped my purse. Jin must have picked it up with my things by accident when we were cleaning up earlier. A wave of murmurs swept through the crowd. Jin's eyes widened. Accidentally picked it up? He racked his brain. Had he somehow scooped it up with the pamphlets or notebooks? He supposed it was possible if it was sitting among the papers, though he had no memory of doing so. One of the girls looked doubtful. Really? It was in his backpack, though. Saya straightened, clutching the purse to her chest. She gave the girl a mild smile. I appreciate everyone's concern, but it's all right. Jin isn't a thief. It was just a misunderstanding. Her tone was reassuring, yet firm. The authority in her voice made it clear that the discussion was over. The group gradually dispersed, some shrugging as if to say, if Saya says so, it must be fine. Jin felt an almost dizzying rush of gratitude. She believed me. He bent down to gather the scattered contents of his backpack. Saya joined him, helping pick up a stray notebook. When everyone else had gone, Saya spoke quietly, so only he could hear. I know you didn't take it. Jin felt uneasy. Thank you, he said softly. I don't know how it got in my bag. Saya's brow furrowed slightly. Neither do I. It's strange. Then she shook her head and gave him a gentle pat on the shoulder. Don't worry about it, okay? Maybe I dropped it and someone thought it was yours. Either way, nothing's missing. Jin nodded, though inwardly he felt troubled. As they parted ways that evening, Jin couldn't shake one thought. He owed Saya, yet again. She had trusted him when it mattered most. What Jin did not see was the brief flicker in Saya's eyes as she walked away, purse in hand, a glint of satisfaction that vanished as quickly as it came. Spring continued, and excitement filled the halls. The school field trip was almost here. They had a weekend trip to Kyoto. It was all anyone talked about. Plans for sightseeing, late-night pillow fights in the ryokan, and the chance to bond outside of school. Jin, who had never been on a school trip before, found himself caught up in the anticipation. In April, he would have assumed he'd spend any trip alone at the margins, but now, thanks to Saya, he actually had friends to share the experience with. Yumi had cheerfully insisted that Jin be in their group for all activities. Ken teased that Jin had to be their official photographer since he was always so quiet. He could capture everyone else's embarrassing moments without drawing attention to himself. Jin had smiled at that, feeling a sense of belonging he never thought he'd have. However, going to Kyoto required money, and a substantial sum at that. Each student had to pay for their share of transport, lodging, and meals. For weeks, teachers reminded everyone to bring in the payment from their parents. Jin knew it was hard for his family, but his parents still gathered the money after seeing how important the trip was to him. He guarded that envelope of cash carefully all week. On the Friday before the trip, homeroom was abuzz as everyone turned in their money. Saya, as class president, took on the responsibility of collecting the fees. She passed a large manila envelope around, checking off names on her list as students added their individual payment envelopes inside. When it reached Jin, he slid his contribution in and handed the packet to the next person. The combined class fees amounted to a small fortune, nearly 2 million yen in cash. By lunch, Saya had verified the total and resealed the large envelope. Jin noticed she seemed a bit distracted, checking her watch often. She mentioned something about needing to help the music club after school, which might cut things close with the office's closing time. Afternoon classes dragged on. As the final bell rang, students began packing up. Saya sat at her desk, holding the envelope of trip money when her phone suddenly buzzed. She glanced at the screen and her eyes widened slightly. Jin, who was tidying his notes nearby, heard her murmur, Oh, now? It can't wait? In a low tone, she ended the call and approached Jin with an apologetic smile. Jin, I hate to ask this of you, but could you do me a favor? Saya held out the envelope of money. I need to take an urgent call from a teacher. It's about our cultural festival collaboration. It might take a while, but the office is closing soon. Could you take this envelope to Mrs. Sato for me? Just hand it over and get a receipt. I trust you completely with it, but if you're uncomfortable, of course, I can do it, Jin interjected quickly. He was surprised she'd choose him for such a task, but also honored by her trust. He knew how important this money was. I'll take it right now. Saya's face lit up with relief. Thank you so much. You're a lifesaver, Jin. She showed him the money, slipped it into the envelope, then handed over the heavy envelope. Be careful, okay? I'll finish the call and wait for you here. Jin nodded, carefully tucking the bulky envelope into his school bag, which he held tight in his arms. I'll be back soon, he promised. He hurried out of the classroom and down the corridor. The afternoon sun slanted low. He had perhaps 15 minutes before the administration office closed. The quickest route was through the rear courtyard behind the gym. The area was deserted at this time of day. As he rounded the corner by the equipment shed, he collided with someone. It was Goro, who had stepped deliberately into his path. The impact knocked Jin off balance. He staggered and dropped to one knee, the envelope jolting from his grasp. Horror washed over Jin as he saw the money envelope hit the ground with a heavy thud. Time seemed to slow. Behind him, Goro let out a low whistle. Well, what do we have here? He mused, feigning surprise. If even a single yen went missing, he would be responsible. The entire class's trip, the trust Saya had placed in him, was jeopardized in an instant. Without a word, Goro knelt down and picked up the envelope. His movements were unnervingly calm, as if he had expected this. Jin kept his head low, but his mind screamed that this had to be more than coincidence. Standing up, Goro glanced briefly at the envelope under the faint outdoor light, then looked directly at Jin, who stood drenched and shaking. Goro's lips curved into a benign smile that didn't reach his eyes. You should be more careful, Jin, he said almost kindly. Running around with so much money, you might attract the wrong attention. Jin swallowed hard. Give it back, he said quietly. Please, that's for our class trip. Of course, Goro answered smoothly. To Jin's astonishment, Goro handed over the envelope without a fight. It felt oddly stiff and heavy in his hands, but Jin was too panicked to check it. All he could think of was reaching the office as quickly as possible. There, that's everything we found, Goro said. We wouldn't want you to lose any. His politeness was more frightening than his threats. Jin didn't have time to finish that thought. He murmured a shaky, thank you, just to keep things civil, and tried to step around Goro. But Goro put a firm hand on his shoulder, halting him. Relax, Goro said softly. No harm done, right? We helped you out here. Maybe remember this favor later. Jin knew there was no genuine favor, only a setup for a future shakedown or blackmail. He nodded weakly and pulled away, clutching the envelope tightly. As he hurried off toward the office building, he dared one backward glance and saw Goro and his friends still standing in the path, watching him. Goro raised one hand in a lazy wave, that unsettling smile still on his face. Jin faced forward and broke into a run. Consequences be damned if the envelope got a bit crumpled. The school bursar, Mrs. Sato, looked up in alarm. Jin immediately started explaining that he had slipped and dropped the envelope, but recovered it quickly with help from some classmates. Sato, taken aback, brought him into a side room to count the cash. She opened the envelope and froze. Inside were not stacks of yen, but thick blocks of folded scrap paper and old exam sheets cut to size. No money at all. Jin stared in disbelief as she dumped the contents on the table. The brown envelope was filled only with paper fillers where bundles of cash should have been. He had walked straight into a trap, and now, to everyone else, it would look like he had brought an empty envelope instead of the class's trip funds. Within the hour, Jin found himself in the principal's office, trying to explain what happened. You're claiming that Goro and 2 other students accosted you and stole the money, then gave you this counterfeit package? Vice Principal Koji summarized with a frown. He looked unconvinced, and Jin couldn't blame him. It sounded like a far-fetched tale crafted to deflect blame. Yes, Jin said in a small voice. They knew I was coming. I think someone told them. The principal's face was sympathetic but troubled. Jin, no one else knew you were delivering the envelope except Saya and maybe 1 or 2 others nearby. Are you suggesting? Before he could finish, the door opened and Saya herself hurried in. She looked between the serious faces of the administrators and Jin's pale, stricken one. I came as soon as I heard, she said softly, taking a seat. Her eyes were red-rimmed as if she'd been crying. Is it true? The money? It's gone? The principal nodded gravely. It appears so. We were just hearing Jin's account of what happened. All attention turned back to Jin. He wished more than anything that this was a nightmare he could wake from. But Saya's presence also ignited a tiny hope. She knew he was innocent. Surely she would support him. He clung to that as he repeated in a trembling voice, Goro and his friends took it. They must have known I'd be there. I don't know how, but they were waiting. He trailed off, realizing how feeble it sounded. Koji tapped a pen on the table, skeptical. And where are these boys now? School security did a quick sweep and didn't find them on campus. They probably ran off, Jin said. He looked imploringly at Saya. Saya, you know I wouldn't. Saya sniffed sharply, wiping at her eyes. I'm sorry. This is partly my fault. I'm the one who asked you to take the money. Her voice quavered, laden with guilt. I never should have put you in that position, the principal interjected gently. Saya, no one blames you. You had no idea something like this would happen. Saya nodded, but tears welled in her eyes. She turned to Jin with a wounded expression. Jin, I trusted you. Her words were soft, yet each syllable felt like a blow. When my purse went missing and turned up with you, I believed it was a mistake. I defended you. And now this? Jin felt his throat constrict. Saya, you don't think I did this, do you? The thought was unbearable. She bit her lip, looking utterly heartbroken. I don't want to believe it. You've been so kind and helpful, but I don't understand how this could happen. She gestured to the contents on the table, the useless paper that had been passed off as money. If Goro truly robbed you, that's awful. But why were you on the back route by the gym in the first place? Why not stay in the main halls where there were people around? I was just trying to be quick, Jin faltered, realizing too late how careless that sounded. Koji seized on it. A quick route where no one would see, Jin's eyes widened. No, I was only trying to deliver it fast, not hide. The principal sighed deeply and folded his hands. This is a very serious matter. Almost 2 million yen have vanished. The school must notify the authorities and get to the bottom of this. Jin, if what you're saying about Goro is true, we will investigate. But understand how it looks from our perspective. You were entrusted with a large sum and it disappeared on your watch. Until we have concrete evidence of someone else's involvement, responsibility falls on you. Each word felt like a stone dropped on Jin's chest. Sir, I would never steal, he whispered urgently. The principal gave him a pitying look. Jin, perhaps it was an honest mistake. Maybe you set the envelope down and someone took it, but without proof, the school has to take appropriate action. Saya hung her head, a tear spilling down her cheek. I'm so sorry, she mumbled, barely audible. The principal cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable, but resolved. Jin, until further notice, you are suspended from school pending the investigation. We'll have to inform your parents and consider involving the police given the sum of money. I advise you to write down everything you remember and cooperate fully, suspended, possibly facing the police. The weight of it crashed over Jin. This was beyond a nightmare. It was his ruin. His vision blurred as hot tears of frustration and fear welled up. How could everything have gone so wrong? He looked desperately at Saya, hoping for some last shred of support. But Saya avoided his gaze, her shoulders trembling as if she were holding back sobs. In her eyes, it seemed, he had already been judged. The meeting adjourned solemnly. The principal gently guided a shell-shocked Jin out to the lobby, where his parents had been called to pick him up. They arrived, alarmed and confused. Jin's mother rushed to him, asking what happened, but he could barely form the words. As the principal explained the situation to them privately, Jin slumped on a bench in the corridor, staring at the floor. After a few minutes, Saya emerged from the conference room. She approached Jin slowly, twisting the strap of her bag in her hands. The corridor was empty except for them. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Saya whispered, "Why?" Jin looked up, eyes red. "Saya, I didn't..." She cut him off, her voice trembling. "Do you have any idea what this means? The whole class, our trip, it's ruined, and people are saying..." She didn't finish, choking on her words. Jin stood, shaking. "I'm going to fix this," he pleaded. "I'll find the proof, I swear. I'll get the money back. Please, you have to believe me." Saya stepped back, a sad, distant look in her eyes. "I believed in you before. With the purse, I stood up for you, Jin. But now, I don't know what to believe." She wiped at her face. "I trusted you, and look what happened. How am I supposed to trust you after this?" Her words stabbed through him. Saya, the one person whose faith in him had meant everything, now sounded defeated and unsure of his innocence. "I'm sorry," she whispered, bowing her head as tears fell. I can't." Jin reached a hand out desperately, but Saya turned and hurried down the hall, shoulders shaking. He watched her disappear around a corner, feeling like the ground had vanished beneath his feet. She doesn't believe me. The thought rang in his mind, hollow and devastating. Saya thinks I betrayed her trust. Jin's mom gently touched his arm, jolting him out of his daze. It was time to go home. He moved as if in a trance, guided by his parents, out of the school. The spring afternoon that had been so bright now felt oppressively dark. On the ride home, Jin numbly answered his parents' worried questions with the basic facts. They were shocked and angry on his behalf, but also frightened. Such a large theft could involve the police. Jin barely spoke. His thoughts were stuck in a loop of anguish. That evening, Jin sat in his bedroom in silence. Outside, a spring storm began to brew, rain pattering against the window. He replayed every event in his mind, searching for clues. How had Goro known he'd be there? In his mind, Goro's mocking words replayed, "You should blame yourself," made things real easy for us. What had he meant? Was it possible someone had told Goro where Jin would be? The only person who knew was Saya. A tiny, unsettling notion tried to form, but he pushed it away. She had trusted him, until he seemingly failed her. A tear slipped down Jin's cheek. Jin buried his face in his hands. Right now, none of it made sense. All he knew was that if he didn't do something, he would be labeled a thief, and his life at high school would effectively be over. The next morning, Jin stayed home as required by his suspension. Each minute away from school felt like torture, knowing his classmates were probably talking about him. Rumors must be flying through the hallways like wildfire. He imagined their angry faces, that their trip money was gone. Mid-morning, as rain drizzled outside, Jin sat listlessly at the kitchen table. His mother hovered worriedly, making him tea he barely sipped. The doorbell's ring startled them both. "I'll get it," his mother said, and went to answer. A moment later, she returned with a surprise guest in tow. Yumi. Jin stood up, uncertainty and hope flaring in equal measure. Yumi smiled sheepishly as she held up a thermos. "I brought soup. Figured you might not feel like eating," she offered lightly. His mother tactfully excused herself to give them privacy, leaving Yumi and Jin alone in the small living room. Jin managed a faint smile. "Thanks. You didn't have to." Yumi shrugged, plopping down on the couch and gesturing for him to join her. "I wanted to. How are you holding up?" Jin didn't know how to answer, so he just sighed. "I've been better." They sat in silence for a moment. Finally, Yumi spoke, her voice quiet. "It's a mess at school today. Everyone's upset about the trip money. A lot of people are saying things about you." "I can imagine," Jin muttered, feeling a flush of shame. "To be honest," Yumi continued, "yesterday I wasn't sure what to think either. It looked really bad." She gave him a sharp look. "Hey, I came here because I don't think you did anything wrong. I need to hear your side, straight from you. Please just tell me exactly what happened with Goro." Something in her tone, earnest and supportive, made Jin open up. He recounted every detail. Saya's phone call and urgent request, his decision to take the shortcut behind the gym, the ambush by Goro's gang, and the envelope swap. Yumi listened intently, nodding occasionally. When he finished, she let out a breath. "I believe you." Emotion welled in Jin's chest. Aside from his parents, Yumi was the only person who'd said those words. He quickly wiped his eyes, mumbling, "Thank you." Yumi offered a reassuring pat on his shoulder. "We're going to figure this out. I've actually been suspicious since yesterday, even before all this blew up." She hesitated, then admitted, "I'm thinking about Saya." Jin blinked in confusion. "Saya? What do you mean?" Yumi glanced around as if to ensure they were alone. "I don't know how to say this gently, but I think Saya might be involved in what happened." Yumi held up her hands. "I know how it sounds." She took a deep breath. "You know, Saya and I aren't super close, but we've worked together on the student council for a couple years. I've always admired her, but in the past month or so, I started seeing cracks." "What kind of cracks?" Jin asked warily. "She's been on edge, more stressed than usual, and I caught a few glimpses of a side of her that didn't fit the Saya we know." Yumi lowered her voice. "Remember the day her purse went missing and then turned up in your bag?" Jin flinched at the memory. "Yes. She said it was a misunderstanding, that I accidentally picked it up. You were there searching with us, right?" "I was," Yumi confirmed. "At the time I thought nothing of it beyond feeling bad that you got blamed. But now, 2 incidents involving you in a row? Both times Saya was oddly central. The purse incident, she immediately squashed the idea of you stealing and everyone just accepted her word. It made her look merciful. The perfect precedent for giving a mistake. And it made you trust her even more, didn't it?" Jin's brow furrowed. When framed that way, it almost sounded like, "You think she planted her purse in my bag on purpose?" "It sounds crazy," Yumi admitted, "but it crossed my mind. She proved she could vouch for you and people listened. Then with the money, if she turned on you, everyone would follow her lead in doubting you." Still, Jin resisted. "Even if the purse thing was on purpose, why would she want to set me up? I'm nobody special." Yumi looked down. "I think Saya wanted the trip money for herself. I don't know all her reasons," Yumi said softly. "People can have secret sides. Maybe she needed the money for something personal. Or maybe," and here her voice hardened, "she just thought she could get away with it and deserved a reward for always being the good girl." Yumi continued. "Yesterday, I overheard something. Before you were attacked, Saya was on the phone. When I passed by the classroom, I heard her say, 'He's going through the gym area now.' I thought she meant a teacher or an errand. But later, I realized she might be telling Goro where you'd be. After you were taken to the office, some of us were in the classroom waiting. Ken said we should call the police right away or search everyone's lockers. But Saya shut down the idea. She said we shouldn't jump to conclusions or treat classmates like criminals. At the time, it sounded like she was being cautious and fair. But looking back, her reaction was really strong, almost like she was scared of the investigation going too far, too fast." Jin's heart pounded as each puzzle piece fell into place. It was almost too terrible to believe, but the evidence was mounting. Saya, the person he had revered and trusted most, might have been behind it all. "We need to prove it," he said quietly, his voice shaking. Yumi gave a fierce, determined smile. "I know. I'm with you. I already started doing a little digging." Carefully, Jin tilted his head. "I decided to watch Saya after school yesterday," Yumi confessed. "I pretended to go home, but doubled back and followed her." Jin stared at her, surprised by her boldness. "What did you find?" Yumi bit her lip, face troubled. "I saw her meet up with Goro. It was after school," she explained quietly. "I secretly followed her. She stopped at an empty spot and waited. They acted suspicious. I hid and recorded some of it on my phone." She pulled out her cell and queued up a video. On it, a grainy, zoomed-in image showed 2 figures, the tall bulk of Goro and the recognizable clothes of Saya. They appeared to be arguing quietly. Saya handed Goro something, an envelope, perhaps, and though the audio was muffled by rain, a snippet of their voices could be heard. On the video, Goro's sneering tone. "Share, like you promised?" Saya's voice was low and firm. "Not now. I've kept it hidden. Wait until things calm down." Don't do anything stupid. The recording ended as the two seemed to part ways, with Yumi explaining she had to duck out of sight to avoid being spotted. Jin felt cold all over. There it was, Saya consorting with the very person he'd accused, giving him a share of the money, presumably, and instructing him to keep an eye on someone. Wait, Jin said slowly. Yumi, play her words again. She rewound the clip. Saya's voice crackled. I've kept it hidden. Wait until things calm down. Jin's eyes widened. A sick realization struck him. She kept it hidden, not him. If Goro had stolen the money, he would never hand it back to her. He'd keep it until she gave him his cut. Yumi, Jin whispered, pale. He never took it. Goro didn't steal anything in that courtyard. He didn't have to. The truth slammed into him like a blow. The envelope Saya gave me, it was already fake. That was why Goro stayed calm. It hadn't been a robbery at all. He was only a distraction, meant to make Jin point the finger at him, while Saya stayed untouchable. She still has the real money, Jin said. His hands trembled with a mix of fury and deep hurt. This is proof. It's something, Yumi agreed, but I'm not sure it's enough. The video is grainy and dark. It's hard to 100% tell it's Saya, though we know it is. And they don't mention the money or your name explicitly on what I recorded. Jin realized she was right. To an outsider, that video could be explained away or doubted. Perhaps Saya scolding Goro for bullying or some unrelated matter. They needed something undeniable. Maybe if we show it to the principal, Jin began, but Yumi shook her head. He might confront Saya, and she could have some excuse or claim it's not what it looks like. Without solid evidence, accusing the beloved class president could backfire. We need to catch her red-handed or get a confession. Jin ran a hand through his hair. How? She's careful, and I'm not even at school to watch her now. Yumi gave a sly smile. Leave that part to me. I have an idea. They huddled together as Yumi outlined a risky plan. They would set a trap, force Saya to expose herself. First, they had to pressure her into making a mistake. I'm going to plant a rumor at school, Yumi said. I'll make sure Saya overhears that the teachers are organizing a thorough search of the school grounds and lockers tomorrow, and maybe that the principal is considering calling the police to investigate Goro. From the video, it looked like she was still keeping it hidden somewhere inside the school. Jin nodded slowly. If she's afraid, she might slip. Exactly. Especially if she hid the money somewhere on campus. She'll want to get it out, or secure it. They both considered the possibilities. Saya could have hidden the cash at home, but given how quickly everything happened that day, she wouldn't have gotten a chance. She used that old club room for a private call. Maybe she hid something there. I can stake out the school tonight, Yumi offered. If she comes to move the money, I'll catch it on camera. Jin immediately shook his head. Not alone. It's too dangerous. Goro could be with her, and sneaking around at night. Yumi raised an eyebrow. You have a better idea? You're suspended. You can't be on campus without drawing attention. But I can hang around after practice and hide out. Jin clenched his jaw. He hated feeling powerless. I'll sneak in too. This is my fight as much as yours. Seeing his determination, Yumi gave a reluctant nod. All right, we'll both go. Just be careful. Yumi left shortly after, giving Jin a firm pat on the back. Hang in there. By tomorrow, this could all be over. The next day, after Yumi spread the rumors around school, she began shadowing Saya. She stayed close, watching her every move in case Saya tried to secretly move the hidden money. But Saya stayed cautious to do anything. Late that night, high school lay shrouded in darkness and rain. The campus was officially closed and empty. It was perfect cover for what Jin and Yumi intended to do. Jin's parents thought he was asleep in bed. Instead, he slipped out just before midnight, hood pulled low and shoes quietly crunching on wet gravel. He made his way carefully to the side gate of the school. Yumi was already there, sheltered under a tree with a black umbrella. She wore dark clothing and had a small backpack slung over her shoulder. You made it, she whispered as he approached. Jin nodded, rainwater dripping from his bangs. Any sign of her? Not yet, she murmured. But if she's going to act, it'll be tonight. I spread a rumor about a big search tomorrow and possible police involvement. She definitely heard me saying it after school. Then I followed her, but there was no sign of her moving the money. Jin took a steadying breath, nerves jangling. How do we get in? Yumi held up the key with a grin. I borrowed this from the janitor's room earlier. It opens the back door of the gym. Jin couldn't help but smile back. You really thought of everything. They circled to the rear of the school complex. True to her word, the old key opened a side door of the gymnasium with a rusty squeak. Inside, the expansive gym was pitch black and smelled of floor polish. They skirted along the wall, using a small flashlight Yumi had brought to navigate to the other end, where a fire exit led out near the old storage and club rooms. Peeking through the gym's back door, they saw the open courtyard where, just a day ago, Jin had been ambushed. Now it was slick with rain and empty, except for a single beam of light bobbing in the distance near the door of the old calligraphy club room. Jin's heart leapt into his throat. A figure was kneeling by the clubroom's padlocked door, fiddling with the lock. Even from afar, the long dark hair plastered to her shoulders was unmistakable. Saya. She was alone, it seemed. The sight of her sent a mix of emotions surging through Jin. Anger, betrayal, and a pang of sorrow. But he steeled himself. This was the moment of truth. Saya managed to get the door open and slipped inside, her flashlight beam disappearing into the room. Yumi gently nudged Jin. We need to see what she does in there. They waited about a minute, then crept across the courtyard, staying low behind hedges and the shadow of the gym wall. The rain masked any small sounds they made. Soon they were at the slightly ajar door of the old clubroom. Through the gap, they could hear rustling and see Saya's flashlight beam moving around. Jin cautiously peered in. Inside, Saya was kneeling on the floor, pulling aside what looked like a loose panel in the corner. From the gap beneath the floorboards, she tugged out a plastic shopping bag. She unknotted it and withdrew a familiar large envelope. Even by dim flashlight, Jin recognized it as the very envelope he had been given to deliver, now bulging with the real bundles of cash. Saya sat back on her heels, clutching the envelope to her chest. In the silence, Jin could actually hear her let out a shaky sigh of relief. Yumi already had her phone out, recording through the narrow opening. The evidence was plain as day now. Saya Sato with the stolen money in hand. Jin felt a surge of triumph mingled with deep sadness. There was no denying it now. The angel of our high school had stolen their future right out from under them. He should have stayed quiet and let Yumi keep recording, but a swell of emotion overtook him. He pushed the door open and stepped into the room, unable to hold back. "Saya," he said, voice echoing in the small space. Saya whirled around, flashlight shining directly into Jin's eyes. He raised a hand to block the glare. Behind him, Yumi slipped in as well, phone camera still recording steadily. Saya's face was pale and rain-spattered, but she quickly composed her expression into one of shocked confusion. "Jin? Yumi?" she exclaimed softly. "What are you doing here?" Jin shut the door behind them. "We might ask you the same thing," he replied, nodding toward the envelope in her arms. "Moving something?" Saya followed his gesture and realized the incriminating evidence she held. Slowly, she set the envelope down on a dusty desk and straightened up, positioning herself partly in front of it. She forced a shaky laugh. I got a tip that something was hidden here. I was checking it out. I'm just as surprised as you." Her attempt at a light tone wavered. Yumi stepped forward, rainwater dripping from her umbrella, which she now closed and set aside. "Cut the act, Saya. We heard enough. We saw you with Goro. We know you set Jin up at that." Saya's friendly facade flickered. A flash of anger crossed her features before she masked it with a wounded look. "What are you saying? You think I—" She looked at Jin, eyes wide and glistening. "Jin, you know me. You don't really believe I would steal that money, do you?" Jin's heart clenched at how convincing she still sounded. Once, he would have been completely taken in, but not now. He remembered her crocodile tears in the principal's office, how she'd walked away as he begged her to believe him. The memory steeled him. "I didn't want to believe it," he answered, "but the facts are right here." He gestured to the envelope behind her. "You're literally holding the proof." Saya bit her lip, her image of innocent hurt slipping further. Her eyes flicked to Yumi's phone, noticing it for the first time and the red recording light. "You're recording me?" she asked sharply. "Yes," Yumi said, "so don't bother lying." Saya's gaze hardened. For a moment, an ugly silence filled the room, broken only by the patter of rain outside. When Saya spoke again, her tone was different, colder, with a razor's edge beneath the sweetness. "You two think you're so clever," she said quietly. "Give me the phone, Yumi." Yumi shook her head, holding it tight. "Not a chance." Saya stepped forward, and to Jin's astonishment, there was real fury in her eyes now. "I said, give it to me," she repeated, each word like ice. Jin instinctively moved to block Saya's path to Yumi. "Don't come any closer," he warned. It felt bizarre to be squaring off against Saya like this, but he saw now how dangerous she could be when cornered. Saya halted. Her gaze darted between them and the envelope of money behind her. When she spoke again, her words came out in a rush, dripping bitterness. "Do you have any idea what I've done for this school? For our classmates? For both of you?" She let out a short, harsh laugh. "Of course not. All the late hours, all the problems I fixed, all the ungrateful people I had to smile for. I carry everyone's burdens, and what do I get in return? Nothing but expectations to do more." Yumi kept her phone trained on Saya. "So, you felt entitled to the trip money? Is that it? You wanted a payout for being Little Miss Perfect?" Saya's eyes flashed. "Watch your mouth," she hissed. She took a deep breath, struggling for composure, but her voice remained cold. "Why not take it? I earned that money. Why shouldn't I? They'll all forget about me after graduation anyway. I wanted something to show for all my hard work." Jin's voice trembled with anger and hurt. "So you were just going to steal from everyone who trusted you? Ruin our trip, pin it on me, and walk away?" Saya gave him a chilling smile. "It would have worked too if you had just accepted your role. Poor Jin, always the victim. People would pity you for being robbed, or hate you for stealing, but either way you'd fade away eventually. Meanwhile, I'd be off to a better life." Jin felt like he'd been slapped. This was a side of Saya he'd never imagined. I looked up to you," he said quietly, voice strained. "You were my friend." Saya's expression flickered with something like regret, but it was gone as soon as it appeared. She hardened her gaze. "And I did like you, Jin. You're sweet, but you were also convenient." She shrugged one shoulder. "I knew Goro was targeting you. It was simple to manipulate that." Her words cut deep. Jin had to swallow against the lump in his throat. She had been playing him all along. Beside him, Yumi glared at Saya with pure disgust. Saya looked at Jin with a cold smile. "I'll admit, I miscalculated you. I didn't think you'd fight back this hard." She smirked slightly, eyes narrowing with chilling confidence. "Looks like I'm not as perfect as everyone thought." Jin and Yumi were so focused on Saya, they didn't notice Goro quietly stepping in behind them. Without warning, Goro's fist collided heavily with Jin's side, knocking him to the ground. Pain exploded through Jin's body as he gasped for air. Before Yumi could react, Goro roughly shoved her aside, causing her to stumble into a nearby chair, nearly falling over. Saya's smirk widened into open mockery. Did you really think I'd let you ruin everything so easily? You're both fools. She moved closer, looking down at Jin struggling to stand. You never understood, did you? I'm the one who made this school perfect. I'm the one everyone trusts. You're nothing. Jin gritted his teeth, fighting through the pain as he forced himself up onto one knee. Saya laughed coldly, clearly enjoying his struggle. Grab her phone, Goro, Saya commanded sharply, nodding toward Yumi. We need to erase that recording. Goro reached toward Yumi, who protectively clutched her phone to her chest. Through the pain in his ribs, Jin mustered a strained laugh. It was a quiet, almost ironic sound that made Saya and Goro pause. Saya stared at Jin in confusion and anger. What's so funny? She snapped. Jin, still wheezing, pointed weakly toward Yumi's phone. The screen was illuminated and clearly visible. On it was an unmistakable live stream icon, still broadcasting. It's too late, Jin managed to say, a slight smile on his lips. Yumi, bruised but standing, added, Everyone's watching this right now, Saya. She had started a live stream to the school's online forum the moment they confronted Saya. Saya's eyes widened in horror. She realized that her tirade of admissions had been sent out for the whole school to see. Her face went pale and she stumbled back at a loss for words for once. Goro looked horrified, frozen in shock as realization hit him. The silence was shattered by hurried footsteps rapidly approaching. Within moments, the guards and Koji, who must have still been on campus working late, burst into the room, swiftly assessing the scene. Saya and Goro stood motionless, clearly trapped and terrified. Koji's face shifted from shock to deep disappointment as he looked at Saya. The guard kept a watchful eye, but seemed equally taken aback that the model student could be involved in such a deed. Once the story was clear and the evidence undeniable, Koji gently but firmly told Saya and Goro to come with them. As they moved forward to handle the situation, Saya met Jin's gaze one last time, her eyes filled with rage and disbelief. Jin stood shakily, supported by Yumi, feeling a deep sense of relief despite his pain. The truth was finally out, and Saya's reign of deception had come to an undeniable end.